Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So today I want to talk about Naspers, Prosus, and really how I go about researching new investment opportunities. Okay. Anyone who's followed Monish Pabrai recently knows he's been bullish on Naspers, okay, as a way to own Tencent in China. Um, so what I did was I've been digging into Naspers and Prosus recently, and I thought I'd lay out, what my process is. Just thinking maybe it'll be useful for you guys as well. So really, my objective here is to find the smartest people in the room who are talking about these investment opportunities. All right, obviously Monish Pabrai is one of those smartest guys in the room, but it's hard to have a direct interaction with Monish Pabrai. So there's a few different rooms I look in to try to find smart people to talk to about different investment opportunities. One room is Value Investors Club. Okay, love Value Investors Club. Now, the most recent write-up on Naspers, I think, is like more than 3 years old. Okay, and there's no write-up on Prosus. So, I didn't get too far via Value Investors Club. So the second resource room that I really like to look in is Corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. And there's not a whole lot on Naspers. There's a little bit on Prosus. There's actually a message board dedicated to Prosus, but it's pretty lean. Like there's not a lot of messages in there, and it's not very deep in terms of the research that's presented in Corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. So, those are usually my first two go-tos. But that didn't really get me very far with Naspers and Prosus. So what I decided to do is go into MOI Global, Manual of Ideas. Now you have to be a member with MOI. Fortunately, I am. It's typically an annual membership fee has to be paid. It's not necessarily cheap, but John at MOI was kind enough to extend sort of a trial membership to me. So I searched in MOI Naspers. Has anyone presented Naspers as an idea to the Manual of Ideas community? It turns out one fund manager has presented the idea. So back in 2018, Jean-Pierre Verster of Fairtree Capital presented Naspers as his best idea of 2018. Obviously, 2018, it's 3.5 years ago. So there's going to be some stuff that's dated here. But I thought, well, this guy obviously knows a lot about Naspers to be presenting at MOI. Why don't I see if I can get in touch with him, or if he's put out any content on Naspers and Prosus recently. So what I did was I went on to Twitter, which again is basically room number 4. It's a fantastic room to find smart people. I found Jean-Pierre on Twitter. He manages a fund called Protea Capital Management. Okay, so his fund has a Twitter account. He also has a Twitter account. So, he what is this? Last night's episode of Stockwatch. So I watched Stockwatch. He didn't talk about Naspers or Prosus on Stockwatch. He did actually talk about SoftBank, which he sees as a compelling way to play Alibaba. It's sort of like, Naspers is to Tencent as SoftBank is to Alibaba. But I decided, well, I'll reach out to him on Twitter. Enjoyed the segment, was hoping you'd touch on Naspers and Prosus, but maybe next time. And then the next day, he sends me a link to a talk that he just did, right? It's like a 12-minute clip of him talking about Naspers and Prosus and some of these Chinese tech giants and shorting, right? And how do you play a frothy market? How do you hedge your downside in a frothy market? So he touched on like 5 different topics in this 12-minute talk. But it's fantastic, and I'm actually going to take part of this video today to unpack some of what he shared about Naspers and Prosus in this talk from July 6th. So it's just awesome. Through Twitter, I'm interacting with this hedge fund manager in South Africa who I think is managing over $100 million in his fund. To have this level of access, it's just phenomenal. So we're going to get into that 12-minute clip in a moment. But I also just wanted to share, how do you find these smartest people in the room on Twitter? Here's the thing I do. So first, it really helps if you're following, a couple hundred really smart investors. All right. So that takes time to build out, but it doesn't take that long. I've really only been very active on Twitter maybe for 3 months now, and it really pays off pretty quickly. So the thing you can do once you have some kind of a network on Twitter, you can do this without the network as well, but I find it works much better if you have that network, is to do a search in Twitter. I searched Naspers, and then I clicked on latest, and then there's a filter in here, advanced search, where you can select only people I follow. Okay, so it narrows the results, it limits the results to only people that I'm following. And you can see that under here, people you follow. You just click that as a filter. And you can see the tweet that I just put up about this talk I'm going to dig into right now. Shows up, and then you've got other people talking about Nasper, right? Trevor Scott, Speculatius, he's also on corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. The Pupil, also on corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. Panda Value. And what you can do, once you've done a little work on the investment idea, send direct messages to these people who have already done themselves a lot of work on Naspers, for example. So just an incredible resource. Twitter and MOI, if you can get access to MOI Global. But Twitter is free, right? Twitter is free for everyone. It just takes that time of building out your network, but it's probably my favorite resource currently. So, right, let's get into Jean-Pierre Verster's talk on Naspers and Prosus. So the headline, Naspers Prosus share swap is in the best interests of shareholders. All right, that's the position of Jean-Pierre and Protea Capital Management. So I'm just going to share some notes that I took from this 12-minute talk. I will link to this in the description. It is well worth listening to, especially if you're at all interested in Naspers and Prosus. All right. So first, he talks about the regulatory crackdown in China. He has some pretty interesting insights on China. So that's worth a listen if you're into Baba or Tencent, which you're interested in Tencent if you're interested in Naspers and Prosus. So definitely check that out. I'm not going to get into that first part. Now, it was pointed out here that there was 36 asset managers approximately in South Africa that escalated the matter to the Naspers board on some recent actions they've taken to try to unlock shareholder value for Naspers shareholders. Now, Jean-Pierre was not one of those 36 who was kind of protesting recent actions of Naspers, and he gets into why in this talk. He says, this is quite a nuanced issue, okay? It's a more complex issue than what a lot of investors realize when you just look at it from a superficial level, all right? And, the issue is, how does management at Naspers, close the gap between net asset value and share price for Naspers shares? One step they took was to set up, this entity in the Netherlands to try to, have more liquidity, A big issue with Naspers is how concentrated it is in the South African market, and how there's a lot of institutional investors that have mandates that don't allow them to invest in so much concentration in one company. So there's issues there on a number of levels for Naspers. When you look deeper, you see that this share swap has a lot of consequences for the long term, okay, which we believe will be positive for both Naspers and Prosus shareholders. That's consistent with Koos Becker, his long-term orientation. That's really apparent considering how long he's held Tencent. I think it was 2001 that they made like a $34 million investment into Tencent. And in the midst of all of this pressure over the years to sell off those shares, Koos Becker is held, right? This guy clearly has a very long-term orientation. And Pabrai mentions that as well, how he was just very impressed at what Becker has done over at Naspers. But to get to the point where you come to that conclusion, you need to go through some interesting paths, okay? This is the conclusion where, it will be positive both for shareholders of Naspers and Prosus. And you need to discern between what management has said and what is stated in certain circulars and other information, and what is not said. And you need to fill in the gaps. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, what Jean-Pierre says here. A lot of investors have filled in the gaps in a way that makes the Naspers management look incompetent, as if they are doing something that is not in the best interest of shareholders. The way that we filled in the gap, speaking for Protea Capital Management, the way that we filled in the gap is that management can't exactly say everything they are doing and what their long-term strategy is. Okay? That's curious. Why can't management just be direct and candid about what they're doing? There's a very good reason for that. Tax laws change. Rules and regulations regarding foreign exchange restrictions change. If they tell us exactly what they want to do over the long term, the rules might change in the interim, preventing them from actually executing the long-term plan. All right? Makes sense. We firmly believe that what they want to do over the long term is create a company that is primarily listed in the Netherlands. Okay, so they want to transfer assets from being domiciled in South Africa to being domiciled in the Netherlands. That is tax efficient, and that South African investors who for years have held this offshore asset called Tencent, but unfortunately in a very inefficient way through a South African domiciled company called Naspers. And therefore, whenever corporate actions happen, there are very negative tax consequences for Naspers shareholders. Those issues will be resolved in the long term, Jean-Pierre believes, according to the plan for management. But for them to resolve it over the long term, they need to do some interesting and very complicated transactions. Okay? Now these are the things that management is kind of trying to keep on the down low. All right? They don't necessarily want these things to be super transparent. For reasons that were described here. We believe that management are doing the right things. Okay, we think at Prosus it will become clearer as it develops, and management can't signal in advance exactly everything they are about to do. Okay, so it's, their position is we trust that management is moving forward in a direction that's beneficial to shareholders of both Naspers and Prosus. It makes sense to us that they can't really be fully transparent to execute this plan. but we think it will become clear over time through Prosus. So, fascinating. Okay. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to really see what's happening at the level that Jean-Pierre is, supposedly seeing the whole picture here. It's really a beautiful kind of illustration of second level thinking as laid out by Howard Marks in The Most Important Thing. Obviously, it remains to be seen whether Jean-Pierre is correct in this kind of variant perspective, but it's certainly intriguing. It certainly wants, I want to dig much deeper after kind of hearing how Jean-Pierre is seeing the whole situation with Naspers and Prosus. So I plan on doing exactly that. I plan on fully leveraging these other folks on Twitter who have already done work around Naspers, and Jean-Pierre himself. He responded directly to my email. We've interacted on Twitter. It's amazing, what you can get access to, the kinds of people you can get access to through, email, right? Through Twitter. These platforms are incredible. So I do wish we could see what Protea Capital Management holds. I couldn't find them on ticker. I don't really know how to go about figuring out what funds own in South Africa. I don't know, what the system is for digging into that kind of information in that country. But if any of you have any leads on that or advice about how to figure out what Protea holds at the moment, that would be fascinating. And if you have any other sources of information on Naspers and Prosus, so I can really go deep on these investment opportunities, these opportunities to get involved with Tencent, to invest in Tencent with potentially an even more compelling investment case than buying Tencent directly. So I actually noticed there was something on here about, maybe it's not exactly here. I don't remember where I saw it. Might have been top. No. There was something questioning, what are examples of buying a holding company and doing better over time than just buying the thing that you're trying to get access to through the holding company, like buying Alibaba directly versus buying it through SoftBank, buying Tencent directly versus buying it through Naspers. Is it just a silly game we're trying to play with this extra discount that never actually materializes? Has it always been smarter historically just to buy it directly? It's interesting to look at examples of those situations and try to see, here's where you would have been better off going direct. Here's where you would have been better off going through sort of a holding company. It's a fascinating kind of rabbit hole, quite relevant considering where I am now. I did buy Alibaba directly, but Jean-Pierre, he seems pretty bullish on SoftBank as a way to access Alibaba and whatever else SoftBank owns. So it's interesting. It's there's no obvious right answer, but I think it's important to weigh all of these different paths in this journey. So anyway, guys, just wanted to share a little bit more about behind the scenes, how I kind of dig in to different investment opportunities at the top of the funnel, at the beginning, and curious to hear any insights that you guys have about how you do that as well. So we'll leave it there, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.